A camera captured something that seemed ordinary at first. The person on the screen had no idea what was about to happen next. The footage shows a man in running clothes emerging from a narrow trail that connects a wooded area to a suburban cul-de-sac in the town of Briar Glen, North Carolina. It is late afternoon on a Sunday in early October. The jogger slows near the edge of the pavement, bends slightly, and looks down at something just outside the frame. He remains there for several seconds, hands on his knees, as if deciding what to do next. Then he pulls out his phone. That call would begin a chain of events that, within 24 hours, would place his wife in custody on suspicion of murder. The man in the footage is Ethan Calder, 38 years old, a financial consultant who works from home. Ethan is known in the neighborhood for running the same wooded loop every weekend. The trail cuts through undeveloped land owned by the county, an area marked for future construction, but currently left untouched. Families walk dogs there. Teenagers ride bikes. It is not remote, but it is quiet enough that a person can disappear without being noticed for hours. At approximately 4:15 in the afternoon, Ethan calls emergency services. The dispatcher later describes his voice as controlled but strained. He reports finding what appears to be a human hand protruding from a shallow depression in the soil about 50 yards off the trail. He insists he did not touch anything. He says he stepped back immediately and wants officers to arrive before dark. Police from the Briar Glen Sheriff's Office respond within 12 minutes. 2 patrol vehicles park near the entrance to the wooded path. Officers follow Ethan, who remains on site, back to the location he identified. Body camera footage shows him walking slightly ahead, pointing with a trembling hand toward an area partially concealed by fallen branches and loose dirt. What officers uncover is not simply a hand. It is a body, buried hastily, wrapped in what appears to be a plastic drop cloth and secured with duct tape. The soil above it is thin and uneven, as if someone intended to return later to finish the job. The medical examiner, called to the scene shortly after, confirms that the remains belong to a female adult, likely deceased within the last 72 hours. The discovery transforms a routine Sunday into a major crime scene. Detectives establish a perimeter extending 200 yards in all directions. Crime scene technicians photograph tire impressions near a dirt service road that runs parallel to the trail. They also recover fragments of blue tarp material caught on a thorn bush roughly 20 feet from the burial site. Ethan remains at the scene for nearly an hour. Officers ask standard questions. What time did he begin his run? Did he see anyone unusual? Has he ever noticed vehicles parked near the trail? Ethan answers methodically. He says he left his home at approximately 3:30 in the afternoon. He says the route took him about 40 minutes before he noticed disturbed soil and something pale beneath it. He denies seeing any vehicles in the woods. News of the discovery spreads quickly through Briar Glen. By early evening, local reporters gather at the edge of the neighborhood. Authorities withhold the victim's identity pending notification of family. However, detectives privately begin checking recent missing persons reports from surrounding counties. By 8 o'clock that night, investigators identify the victim as Marisol Vega, 32 years old, reported missing 3 days earlier by her sister in a nearby town. Marisol had last been seen leaving her workplace on Thursday evening. Her car was found abandoned in a grocery store parking lot approximately 6 miles from the wooded trail where her body was recovered. The timeline immediately raises questions. If Marisol disappeared on Thursday night, how did her body end up buried in a county-owned wooded parcel by Sunday afternoon? And why was the burial so shallow, so careless, as though interrupted? Detectives returned to Ethan Calder's home later that evening for a formal statement. The house is a modern 2-story structure at the edge of the cul-de-sac, less than half a mile from the trail entrance. Ethan's wife, Laura Calder, greets officers at the door. She appears surprised but composed. Laura is 36 years old, a part-time art instructor at a local community center. Inside the home, Investigators ask Ethan to recount the discovery once more. Laura sits nearby, listening closely. Ethan repeats the sequence of events without deviation. Laura interjects only once, stating that Ethan had mentioned earlier in the week that construction equipment might soon arrive in the wooded area. She speculates that perhaps someone had been dumping debris there. Detectives note that Laura's comment seems oddly specific, given that no public announcement had been made regarding imminent construction. They record the detail, but do not pursue it immediately. Meanwhile, forensic teams process the burial site through the night. They determine that the grave was dug with a narrow spade or trenching shovel. Soil samples indicate the dirt used to cover the body matches the immediate area, suggesting the killer worked on site rather than transporting additional materials. However, tire impressions near the service road suggest a vehicle accessed the area within the past 48 hours. The next morning, authorities release a brief statement confirming the identity of Marisol Vega and classifying the case as a homicide. They do not mention Ethan Calder publicly, referring to him only as a local resident who discovered the remains. Behind closed doors, detectives examine phone records. Ethan's call to emergency services came at 4:15 in the afternoon. Cell tower data confirms his phone was near the wooded area at that time. However, additional pings show that Laura Calder's phone was also in proximity to the same wooded parcel late Friday night, between 10:45 and 11:30. When questioned later about her whereabouts that evening, Laura states she attended a friend's gathering across town. She claims her phone battery died during the event and that she borrowed a charger upon returning home. She cannot explain why location data places her near the woods. Investigators also learn that Laura had once been acquainted with Marisol Vega. The two women attended the same community college nearly a decade earlier. Records show they enrolled in several overlapping art history courses. Social media photographs reveal that they appeared together at least one campus event. When confronted with this information, Laura acknowledges the past connection, but describes it as distant and insignificant. The case begins to shift. What initially appeared to be a random discovery by a concerned jogger now presents subtle inconsistencies. Detectives obtain surveillance footage from nearby traffic cameras. One camera positioned at an intersection leading toward the wooded service road captures a dark-colored SUV passing through shortly after 11 o'clock on Friday night. The vehicle resembles Laura Calder's car. By Tuesday afternoon, less than 24 hours after Ethan's discovery, investigators secure a warrant to search the Calder residence. Inside the garage, forensic teams locate a folding trenching shovel with traces of soil embedded along the blade. Preliminary field tests indicate that the soil composition is consistent with samples collected from the burial site. In a storage bin near the back wall, officers find a partially used roll of blue tarp material. A torn edge matches the fragment recovered from the thorn bush in the woods. Does not resist. As she is escorted to a does not resist. As she is escorted to a patrol vehicle, Ethan stands on the front porch, expression fixed, watching silently. Neighbors observe from behind curtains and doorways. Within 24 hours of a jog through familiar woods, Ethan Calder's wife sits in an interrogation room under suspicion of murder. What remains unclear is whether Ethan truly stumbled upon a crime scene by chance, or whether the discovery was part of something more deliberate. When detectives begin examining Laura Calder's background in detail, they move beyond the surface-level connections and focus on patterns. At first glance, Laura appears stable. She teaches introductory art classes 3 evenings a week. She volunteers at a local gallery. There are no prior arrests, no restraining orders, no public disputes. But investigators are not looking for a public record of violence. They are looking for preparation. Financial records provide the first significant shift in direction. 6 months before Marisol Vega's disappearance, Laura withdrew $15,000 from a joint investment account she shared with Ethan. The transaction was labeled as a transfer for studio expansion. There is no evidence that any expansion occurred. When questioned, Laura explains that she considered renting a larger teaching space, but ultimately changed her mind. She cannot produce contracts, correspondence, or invoices supporting that explanation. Phone analysis reveals more. Over the previous 3 months, Laura searched online for phrases including, "How long does soil take to settle?" "Best tools for digging in clay," and "decomposition timeline buried body." The searches occurred late at night, often after midnight, when Ethan's phone data shows him inactive at home. Detectives also uncover archived messages between Laura and Marisol from nearly 10 years earlier. The tone of those exchanges is not friendly. In several messages, Laura accuses Marisol of spreading rumors during college. One message reads, "You think you can just take what you want and walk away." Another states, "You ruined something that mattered to me." The context of those statements remains unclear at first, but they establish unresolved conflict. The investigation expands to include Ethan Calder's financial and personal history. Detectives learn that Ethan and Marisol reconnected earlier in the year through a professional networking event. Records show they exchanged messages regarding investment consulting. Several of those messages continued beyond business topics and became personal in tone. While there is no explicit evidence of an affair, the frequency and timing of communication raise questions. When confronted with this information, Ethan admits that he met Marisol for coffee twice in the spring. He insists the meetings were professional. He acknowledges that he did not tell Laura about them, claiming it would have caused unnecessary tension. Detectives note that Laura's search history intensifies in the weeks following those meetings. Investigators reconstruct the week leading up to Marisol's disappearance. On Thursday evening, Marisol leaves her workplace at approximately 6:30. Security footage from the parking lot shows her entering her vehicle alone. She texts a friend shortly after 7, stating she plans to meet someone later, but does not specify who. Her phone signal drops near a commercial district roughly 4 miles from the wooded trail. Traffic camera analysis shows Laura Calder's SUV in the same district at approximately 7:45 that night. The two vehicles are captured within minutes of each other at adjacent intersections. Detectives now consider the possibility that Laura arranged to meet Marisol under false pretenses. A critical piece of evidence emerges from a local hardware store. Surveillance footage from Wednesday afternoon shows Laura purchasing a trenching shovel, heavy-duty gloves, and 2 large plastic drop cloths. She pays in cash. The clerk remembers the transaction because Laura asked specific questions about soil resistance and durability of the tools. Phone location data places Laura near the wooded service road late Friday night. Tire impression analysis confirms that the tread pattern found at the burial site matches Laura's SUV. Soil recovered from the shovel in the Calder garage contains trace plant material identical to vegetation found at the crime scene. The question shifts from whether Laura was involved to why. Interviews with former classmates reveal additional context. During college, Laura and Marisol competed for the same academic scholarship. Faculty records confirm that Marisol ultimately received the award. According to one former professor, Laura reacted poorly, claiming the selection process was biased. Although years had passed, acquaintances describe Laura as someone who held grudges quietly rather than confronting them openly. Detectives also uncover a more recent catalyst. 2 months before the murder, Laura discovered messages between Ethan and Marisol on his laptop. Digital forensics show that Laura accessed Ethan's email account without his knowledge. Shortly after that access, Laura began documenting details in a private journal found in her studio. The journal entries are methodical. They reference dates of Ethan's meetings, locations, and durations. One entry reads, "She thinks she can come back into my life and take him." Another entry states, "If she disappears, everything resets." The progression of language grows increasingly detached and strategic. Further analysis of Laura's online activity reveals research into county land ownership maps. She viewed public records showing that the wooded parcel near her home was scheduled for development the following year. Notes saved to her computer indicate awareness that construction could potentially disturb buried evidence. One document includes a highlighted line reading, "Minimal foot traffic after dark." Detectives believe the plan was structured in stages. First, re-establish contact indirectly through Ethan's professional connection. Second, arrange a meeting under the guise of resolving past grievances or clarifying misunderstandings. Third, eliminate the perceived threat in a location that would not immediately raise suspicion. Interrogation transcripts reveal that Laura initially denies meeting Marisol on Thursday night. However, confronted with traffic camera evidence, she adjusts her statement. She claims Marisol contacted her unexpectedly and requested a private conversation. According to Laura, the meeting escalated emotionally and ended abruptly, but she insists she left Marisol alive. Forensic analysis contradicts that account. Trace fibers found on Marisol's clothing match upholstery in Laura's SUV. Additionally, small paint particles recovered from the plastic wrapping correspond to the type of paint used in Laura's studio workspace. Ethan's role remains under scrutiny. Investigators examine whether he had knowledge of Laura's intentions. There is no evidence that Ethan purchased tools, researched burial techniques, or communicated directly with Marisol in the days immediately before her disappearance. However, detectives question whether Ethan's Sunday run and rapid discovery were coincidence. Ethan's running route, documented through a fitness tracking application, typically avoids the exact section of woods where the body was found. Historical data shows that in the previous 6 months, he deviated into that portion only once. On the Sunday of the discovery, he entered that area within minutes of beginning his run. When asked about the deviation, Ethan explains that he felt compelled to explore a side path he had previously ignored. He denies prior knowledge of the burial site. Investigators cannot prove otherwise, but they note that Ethan's phone activity late Saturday night included multiple calls to Laura that went unanswered. The timeline tightens further. Cell phone metadata indicates that Laura powered off her device for approximately 1 hour late Friday night, coinciding with the estimated burial window. During that same period, Ethan's phone remained stationary at home. Detectives begin to consider whether Laura acted entirely alone or whether emotional manipulation played a role. Interviews with friends describe Laura as intensely private and capable of compartmentalizing anger. Ethan, by contrast, is described as conflict avoidant and trusting. As forensic results accumulate, the narrative becomes clearer. Marisol likely met Laura under the assumption of conversation. An altercation occurred inside Laura's vehicle. Evidence suggests blunt force trauma before suffocation. The body was transported under cover of darkness to a wooded area familiar to Laura through proximity to her home. The shallow burial indicates urgency rather than thorough planning. Investigators theorize that Laura expected more time before discovery. What she could not anticipate was Ethan's altered running path. By the end of the second day in custody, prosecutors prepare preliminary charges of first-degree murder. However, they remain cautious about Ethan's potential involvement. The case hinges not only on physical evidence, but on understanding whether the discovery was truly accidental or part of a deeper strategy that has not yet been revealed. The investigation now centers on unraveling whether Laura Calder executed a solitary plan fueled by resentment and jealousy, or whether the jogger who found the body was closer to the truth than anyone initially believed. By the third morning after Laura Calder's arrest, the case appears structurally complete. Physical evidence links Laura to the burial site. Digital records demonstrate preparation. Financial withdrawals, hardware purchases, and internet searches form a coherent timeline. Prosecutors prepare to proceed with a single defendant homicide case. Then, Laura requests to speak again. In the second formal interrogation session, conducted without counsel present after she signs a waiver, Laura changes her posture. Instead of denying involvement, she begins asking investigators what Ethan told them. She wants to know how much he has revealed about his meetings with Marisol. Detectives refuse to disclose specifics. Laura responds with a statement that alters the trajectory of the case. "You're looking at the wrong person," she says. "I buried her, but I didn't kill her." The room shifts. Investigators press for clarification. Laura claims that on Thursday evening, she confronted Marisol after discovering continued communication with Ethan. According to her account, she followed Marisol's car from the commercial district to a quiet stretch near the wooded service road. She says she intended only to demand that Marisol stop contacting her husband. Laura states that Ethan arrived unexpectedly during the confrontation. She claims he had been in contact with Marisol that evening and came to meet her separately. What happened next, according to Laura, was an argument between Ethan and Marisol that escalated beyond control. Detectives do not accept the narrative at face value, but they cannot ignore its implications. They re-examine Ethan's phone records for Thursday night. Although no direct calls to Marisol appear during the critical hour, metadata reveals that Ethan deleted several messages from an encrypted messaging application 2 days after the disappearance. Digital forensic specialists recover fragments of those deleted messages. While incomplete, they confirm that Ethan and Marisol communicated on Thursday afternoon regarding settling everything tonight. The phrase is ambiguous but significant. Investigators confront Ethan with this new evidence. He denies deleting messages intentionally, claiming the application auto-clears conversations. When pressed about whether he met Marisol that evening, Ethan maintains that he remained home until Laura returned later that night. However, security footage from a gas station 2 miles from the wooded trail captures a vehicle matching Ethan's sedan passing through at approximately 8:10 in the evening. The license plate is partially obscured, but distinctive damage to the rear bumper aligns with photographs of Ethan's car. The timestamp places him within proximity of the eventual burial site. During the same window, Laura's phone data went dark. The focus of the investigation expands from motive to coordination. Detectives consider whether Laura's preparation, including tool purchases and research, was independent or conducted with Ethan's knowledge. They obtain a warrant to examine Ethan's laptop and personal cloud storage. Within archived files, investigators find a document titled Exit Strategy. The file predates the murder by nearly 4 months. It contains financial projections related to divorce proceedings, asset division, and estimated alimony. The calculations show that Ethan stood to lose a substantial portion of shared investments if the marriage ended under conventional circumstances. Additionally, email drafts reveal that Marisol had threatened to disclose their renewed relationship to Laura if Ethan did not commit to leaving his marriage. One draft message from Marisol reads, "I am done being hidden.